let me make this clear.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that you were not claiming that dark energy doesn't exist. It was just that the 5 sigma result should be a 3 sigma result. But now it sounds to me as if you're claiming that you believe dark energy doesn't exist.
That's correct.
Okay, so I want to know what changed, how it changed, but also I want to know about this variable dark energy results, the variable dark energy results from DESI, DR1 and DR2, about its weakening. So does that comport with your worldview? Does that take a sledgehammer to it? So tell me how you think about all of it.
Okay, so to answer your first question, that's right. We started doing this analysis when the catalog was first made public. The supernova data was made public in 2014. It actually took us a year and a half to get our paper published because there was a lot of pushback. I mentioned earlier a famous journal that has turned us down because it was a Nobel Prize-winning discovery. But anyway, it did get published in scientific reports in Nature and caused a bit of a stir because, we could show using rigorous statistics that it was not a significant result. But that was just the start of it. So as you said, then there was this pushback by Rubin and Hayden saying, well, we should allow for the supernovae to evolve with redshift. But subsequently, when we looked at the distribution of this acceleration on the sky. So normally we analyze all data in cosmology assuming that the universe is isotropic. Okay. And that the expansion rate, you can do if you like a Taylor expansion, you can say it's got a velocity, then it's got acceleration, then it's got a third derivative that's called the jerk, and so on. You can do an expansion like that. We allowed for this acceleration to have one more degree of freedom. We said, let it have an angular dependence. Let it be a monopole plus a dipole, right? We didn't add more terms because you want to minimize the number of parameters. We have only 740 supernovae. We don't want to increase the number of parameters too much. But then we let our maximum likelihood estimator loose on this data set, and it told us that actually the data overwhelmingly thinks that the acceleration is a dipole. It is only in that direction, and it's negative in the other direction, and basically it's a dipolar pattern on the sky. So when we published this results, this was in 2019, that caused even more of a sort of hullabaloo. And I recall Adam Rees, who is one of the Nobel laureates, he told Physics World, well, these guys, they're using, old data, although he was actually one of the authors of this 2014 data set. And we have many more supernovae now. And also there is other evidence that dark energy exists. These were his two main arguments. So with regard to the first statement, indeed, we are using the old data set because we thought it was a good data set. But now there is a new data set called Pantheon Plus, of which Adam Rees is a leading author. So we have taken that data set and redone our analysis from 2019 on it. And that paper was published last year in 2025, right, after rigorous refereeing. And we find that the dipolar signal is stronger than ever. It's even stronger in the 1700 supernovae or so in the Pantheon Plus data set. Why is this? That's the first part of the statement. And now, if we allow for the supernovae to also have a luminosity that depends on their redshift, depends on the age of their progenitor star, which the Korean astronomers are saying, then in fact, as we go out, it's a dipole, the dipole dies out, but there is still a monopole component left. There is a isotropic component. That isotropic component also disappears if we allow the supernovae to have a luminosity that depends on the age of the progenitor. And the universe then looks like it is actually decelerating, but locally it looks like acceleration because it is aligned with our local bulk flow, and it could be just a local effect because of that. Right. So now I'm of the opinion that, in fact, there is no cosmic acceleration at all. And that certainly is not evidence for dark energy, because something that I should stress is that a cosmological constant vacuum energy has to be isotropic.
Yes.
Because otherwise you violate Lorentz invariance. Different observers will not see the same vacuum, and that is sacrosanct. The problem is, and I should make a strong statement about this, I really get very upset when I see people, astronomers, especially in supernova cosmology, uh, fit things to supernova data without putting in any physical priors on it. In other words, prohibiting things which are unphysical. So they consider the possibility of equations of state which are so extreme that you'd violate unitarity. You'd violate things that are absolutely sacrosanct. But it is allowed in their fit, and the data, one mismeasured data point, can pick out something like equation of state, which violates the strong energy condition, for example, right? But there is a unfortunate gap between relativists on the one hand, right, astronomers on the other hand, and particle
Mhm.
physicists, right?
There's a gap, meaning what?
Well, a culture gap, both a gap in the background and the way that one looks at, phenomena, and the ability to appreciate that uh, a cosmological constant, for example, to an astronomer is just a number. It's like, omega lambda is zero point 0.7, right? And they think it's a simple model because they consider it to be one parameter in a 6 parameter or 7 parameter model. They don't appreciate that for lambda to have that value it does, which is something of order the present day Hubble parameter square, right? If to interpret it as vacuum energy, you would have to adjust uh, operators in the standard model to 60 places of decimals, right? You'd have to cancel terms against each other
Yes.
until everything is gone except one in the 60th decimal place, because the natural scale of the standard model is a TeV, and the energy scale of this dark energy is a EV. Okay, so there is, a lot of gap. There's a huge hierarchy between those two scales, and it simply makes no sense to call it something to do with the vacuum, because it's got nothing to do with the standard model. There are no energy scales in the standard model of order the vacuum energy scale.
Yeah.
And in particular, it cannot have anything to do with anything because the scale is set by the present day Hubble parameter, which is what enters into every measurement, right? But the Hubble parameter is neither fundamental nor a constant. Why should it determine the cosmological constant? I mean, I really don't get why more people are not, struck by this. That's what I wrote in my essay. I said, at this point, alarm bell should be ringing.
The
But
Heart of Darkness essay?
yes, that's right. That is the main point of it.
Just for people who may be tuning in and wondering, what are you referring to when you talk about this gap, and where do you, Professor, lie on this? You, from 2011 to 2019, I believe, were the head of Oxford's particle theory group.
That's right, yeah.
So you have a perspective on
The constant problem.
cosmological issues that
Yeah.
someone who is a pure relativist or a pure astronomer wouldn't have.
Well, I kind of see the points of view of all these three groups. I kind of, I can see how each one looks at them, but I find it, as I said, somewhat frustrating that people who fit the data don't appreciate that sometimes they are playing havoc with fundamental rules of nature. They're violating sacrosanct things like unitarity, which you cannot violate, however radical you are.
Well, if you were to violate that and you were able to show it, then that itself would be worthy of a Nobel Prize.
That would be astounding, but well, I would very much doubt, because in that reality or universe would not exist, so no Nobel Prizes would exist either. But that's not the matter. What I'm trying to say is that it just would be very simply, if I am analyzing data in the framework of a model which forces the only unknown quantity, namely lambda, which is a quantity that is allowed to be added in the standard cosmological model, simply reflecting the fact that we have assumed the model to be strictly isotropic and homogeneous, So it has only got three parameters. There is a matter content, there is a curvature of spatial surfaces, and then there is this quantity lambda, which simply reflects the underlying symmetry of general relativity, that you have local coordinate invariance, right? And then in the, when field theory was discovered, I mean, this was done at a time, and Einstein sort of got all this when we still thought of matter as particles, non-relativistic particles. Of course, later we realized that if you heat up particles enough, they become radiation, but that's still matter. It has got pressure, but the pressure is positive. However, in the 1930s, when field theory was discovered, Wolfgang Pauli, I think he was the first guy to realize that the ground state, the 0 point fluctuations of all these quantum fields also act like a cosmological constant. And the magnitude of these fluctuations is huge. I mean, he looked at the fluctuations that would come just from electromagnetism, quantum version, right? And he wrote that if this coupled to gravity, then the universe would not even reach to the moon. It would be prevented from becoming as large as it is because of the cosmological constant of the vacuum. In fact, he actually made a calculational mistake. The answer is that it would not have been any bigger than this, but bigger than few millimeters. And he, in fact, wrote, this is in the Handbook of Physics, 1933, as is obvious from experience, this 0 point energy does not couple to gravity. Okay. Now, this is the so-called cosmological constant problem, which, Steven Weinberg memorably called, he said it is the bone in our throat.
The catastrophe.
Yeah, it just defied explanation, because according to general relativity, which is a classical theory after all forms of energy density must couple to gravity, right? But as Pauli said, as is obvious from experience, 0 point energy does not couple to gravity, because if it did, then the universe could not ever have expanded to be as large and as old as it is today. So imagine the universe.
Professor, I don't see how this helps your case. So help me understand.
Yeah.
Firstly, is there a reason to believe that dark energy, that we should get to a calculation of what its value should be from vacuum fluctuations? Is there a reason to tie those two together?
Not necessarily.
I know naively we do a calculation and show, well, 10 to the 1, 2, 3, or something like that. We're orders of magnitude off.
Right.
But is there a reason to tie the vacuum fluctuations to dark energy?
Well, strictly speaking, in field theory, you can never actually calculate the absolute value of the vacuum energy. You can only calculate differences in vacuum states, not absolute values. Technically speaking, it's a so-called super-renormalizable term in the Lagrangian. So you can't actually calculate. But what you can say is that without fine-tuning, its value should be set by the energy scale up to which the theory is valid. And we believe that our standard model is valid to few hundred GeV energies at least, right? That's statement one. We can't actually calculate the vacuum energy, but it should be something whose scale is set by a few hundred GeV. Call it a TeV. Statement two, how does this vacuum energy affect the expansion of the universe? That's the second question you can ask. The naive answer is it would have stopped the universe from ever expanding beyond the size of a nucleus. As the universe cooled down and it got to a temperature of a TeV, so the thermal energy has gone, all that is then left is the vacuum energy, that would have either caused the universe to recollapse or to go into eternal inflation. One or the other, depending on the sign. And we can't even calculate the sign in field theory. Okay. The very fact that that did not happen, that we are here discussing it, right, seems to suggest that vacuum energy does not couple to gravity, as Pauli correctly noted, I think, in 1933. However, we do not understand why that should be so, because according to Einstein, everything couples to gravity. So that, in a nutshell, is the essence of the cosmological constant problem, that our best theory of gravity, which is a classical general relativity, right, does not, when coupled with the fact that you have a quantum field theory of the other fundamental interactions, right, at their interface, at their very uneasy interface, is this cosmological constant problem, right? If vacuum energy coupled to gravity, we should not be here. But we do not know any reason why it should not couple to gravity in the formulations that we currently have of these theories. And my biggest disappointment with all attempts to construct theories of quantum gravity is that none of them, loop quantum gravity, string theory, whatever you name, none of them have been able to address the cosmological constant problem. Right? They usually evade it.
The Economist covers math, physics, philosophy, and AI in a manner that shows how different countries perceive developments and how they impact markets. They recently published a piece on China's new neutrino detector. They cover extending life via mitochondrial transplants, creating an entirely new field of medicine. But it's also not just science. They analyze culture, they analyze finance, economics, business, international affairs across every region. I'm particularly liking their new Insider feature. It was just launched this month. It gives me a front row access to The Economist's internal editorial debates, where senior editors argue through the news with world leaders and policymakers in twice weekly long format shows. Basically, an extremely high-quality podcast. Whether it's scientific innovation or shifting global politics, The Economist provides comprehensive coverage beyond headlines. As a TOE listener, you get a special discount. Head over to economist.com/TOE to subscribe. That's economist.com/TOE for your discount.